Welcome to another special edition of BDLL Europe for Saturday, May 9th, 2020. How's everybody doing?
Hey, great.
Yay.
Hey.
Doing
Awesome.
well, thanks.
So YouTube says we're live, so that's all that matters. Let's hope that the internet connection holds out here because I don't really want a repeat of last week. I'm just saying. That was not fun. But anyway, this week before I forget, I do need to relay to everybody about my sound and audio issues later in the show. So remind me about that. But this week, we talked about trying out Ubuntu Mate 2004. So it is not we're not going to do a whole list of people, but anybody that wants to jump in on Ubuntu Mate 2004 and their thoughts on it is more than welcome to do that. And one last thing before we start, if somebody could give me in chat what the sound is. I do have a new piece of hardware in the sound, in the audio mix. So I need to know if the levels are right, if my levels
Sounds good to me.
are as good as your guys' levels or vice versa. So, all right. I installed Ubuntu Mate 2004 on the test machine, and I have
Whoa, Rocco. You haven't turned the light on.
Wait.
We're not
You
open for
are
business
right.
yet.
Very
No,
good,
it's
Alan. Very
official.
good.
We're
Yay,
still
Alan.
officially closed.
That's perfect. I love it. All right. So I tried Ubuntu Mate 2004. I didn't get a whole lot of time to play with it because I just installed it yesterday because I just got everything back together from yesterday. But the install went perfect. I had no issues with it. It went exactly the way it was supposed to go. It comes up and it's just another beautiful Linux desktop. So who wants to get in on this with Ubuntu Mate? Tony, the bearded wonder.
Thanks, Rocco. Yeah, I'm a bit like yourself. I did install it. I've recently installed an Icy Dock 2.5-inch bay with 4 bays on my main desktop PC. So I've now got my Mint 19.3 installed on a 1 terabyte SSD, and then I've got 3 spare 2.5-inch bays that I can hot swap drives into. So I stuck Ubuntu Mate onto one of them, and install, not a problem. It's just as stable as ever doing the install. Everything worked fine. Booted it up, did all the updates and everything, did a few tweaks, and yeah, it's great. I actually had to use it this week. I had a problem on my Mint. I was trying to post an episode to HBR, and it wouldn't accept it for some reason. It kept giving me an error message. So I thought, well, let's see if it's Mint. And so I booted into Ubuntu Mate and did the same thing. It let me do it. So I don't know what the problem was on Mint 19.3, but Ubuntu Mate saved the day for me. So
Ubuntu
so
Mate
far,
better than Linux Mint Shocker.
it could be. I don't know. And it's not as if it's an old install of Mint 19.3, because, like I say, I've just reinstalled my PC with the new 1 terabyte drive. So I don't know what's going on, but there seems to be a little bug in there that was preventing me from uploading to HBR. So, but, you know, Ubuntu Mate came to the rescue, and everything seems fine. All the usual software's there, everything I need's there. So, yeah, thumbs up to the Mate team, Martin. Good one.
All right. Well, we're going to go down the people that have their hands up, but Martin, afterwards, we're going to have to check to see if we've touched on all of the cool features in the new version. So
Okay. All right.
all right, Tony, sir, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. And you?
I'm doing excellent. What do you think of
Good.
Ubuntu Mate?
Very similar to what I said last time. It's very green.
Aw.
I don't like green. It works fine. It's very nice. but I don't like green. I think I already said that.
Mm-hmm.
The other problem I found, the only problem I found with it is, to me, and this is a personal thing, it's nothing against the distro as such. It's a good distro, don't get me wrong, but it's very old-fashioned looking. It's like something that just hasn't caught up to date from 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I think, it's just the way it looks, and it's designed to be that way. I hope I'm not going to get any bricks thrown at me here for saying this, but to me, I want something that looks more modern and is easier to customize. It's an advancement on the previous version, but it's just not for me. And that's about all I've got to say about it, really.
So with regards to it being too green, did you notice that there is all of the colors available in Ubuntu Mate Welcome? So you can pick your favorite now.
You can change the color, yeah, but as soon as I boot it up and I see all this green, it to me, I'm sorry, it just instantly puts me off. I've sort of got to struggle a bit to think, do I really want to go any further and just change it all?
Okay. And I think by saying it looks old-fashioned, I think you're saying it's timeless classic. I think that's what you're going for.
Yes.
It's like an antique. It's very good, but it's an antique, yes.
That's exactly what he meant to say.
Like a classic Rolls Royce.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, nice to look at, but I'll buy one.
All right.
I'll shut up now.
Chill.
Yeah, so I loved it. Just like Rocco, the installs went beautifully. I did several. I did a full install on one of my machines, and then I did an upgrade, and the upgrade went beautifully too. So it's always good. I'm running it right now, and I was upgrading on my main rig I'm using now from 1910, which was a beautiful release. So, and that was actually the first time that I'd ever run a non-LTS on my main production rig. So that was really cool. So now, but having 2004 and having the game mode install made me really happy. Definitely. So it went beautifully. And, I always customize my gnome. So I have a very pink background right now. So everything is pink on mine. But it was just flawless, very, very smooth. And I love the high DPI support. It's gotten even better, which is really wonderful on my 43-inch Ultra HD monitor. So that was really nice, and being able to see everything really easily. And it went super smooth.
So you mentioned the high DPI, and I have 2 screens here, and my daughter came in the room, saw, Pop OS, and she says, "Is that Windows?" And I'm like, "No, that's not Windows." So then I had just installed Ubuntu Mate on the other monitor, and I says, "Man, that's really tiny." And she says, "Yeah, I can't even read that." And she's got like Hawkeyes because this is a 4K monitor. So I said, let me fix that real quick. Went right into the control center display, or no, it was the tweaks, I guess it was.
Tweaks.
Yeah. And switched it to the high DPI, and she was like amazed that it was like that instant it switched. So that was pretty cool.
Awesome.
The things you can do with Linux.
Yay.
All right, Joe, welcome to Biddle, sir.
Thank you. So this was just throwing Mate on there. It's like a flashback for me. Mate was my first official Linux on a Lenovo live with it desktop. So it's been a while, and I thought, oh, it's probably changed a lot, and it hasn't. From layout, it looks really nice. So what was nice is as I got in, I was able to just go find everything I needed. This has been an adventure week for me anyways. I switched from a T580 to a XPS 15. So I went from a 1080p to a 4K screen, and that's a nightmare. And I multi-boot everything. Plus the BIOS on Dell is not fun either. Finally got into that, but what was really amazing, both with Ubuntu, the flavors, I love seeing that Ubuntu logo below the Dell logo when I boot in with that's just phenomenal. But as far as Mate goes, beautiful. A little bit of screen tearing I'm seeing when I move things around, but I just may not have it dialed in just right. But really, really nice. Really, really good work.
How do you find the connection speed from the moon where you appear to be?
Well, it's I've got a satellite going in over it's just out of the camera. You can't really see it, but once that's done, it's going to go megabit speed instead of kilobit. So we're upgrading. We're upgrading. It's a lot of cable. I had Google Fiber on the way, but they canceled that. So I'm working with what I got right now.
Wow.
So I appreciate you putting up with it.
All right, Big Pod, sir.
Yeah, Ubuntu Mate is great. I installed it on my laptop, and I basically fell in love with it. So I don't know what.
Are you
going
to keep it on there, Big Pod? Are you going to keep it on there?
Yeah. It's for minimum of 6 months. It's gonna be here. I decided to switch up from March, so I decided to go with Ubuntu Mate, and I fell in love with it. It's a great distro, and that's all thanks to Martin and his team. Also, I would like to thank Martin for the great fix on the FFmpeg and OBS. It's really nice to use OBS now, which was horrible in 1904 and 1810 and 1910. So now it works great. How do you say?
I've been using the Snap version of OBS for, I don't know, since it came out. Just saying.
Well, I was on Arch, so I normally had everything just fine. But when I was testing Ubuntu, it was kind of a pain installing Snap just for that. If you knew that it should work.
Well, to be honest with you, I think the reason that I installed the Snap version, there was something that the regular version of OBS wasn't doing, and I can't remember what it was. No, I don't think it was NVIDIA. I think it was like being able to capture the zoom window or being able to capture a browser window without the black screen. It eventually was fixed, but the Snap version had it first, so I just kept rolling with it. So
for me, it was NVIDIA encoding that was problematic because it was somewhat not working, or really not working because of FFmpeg and changing how the NVEC codecs got delivered.
all right, Steve, you've had your hand up for a while, brother. Welcome back to Biddle.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I had to come back because it was Mate week.
Right.
And about 2 years ago, when I got all my Linux computers with over 4 gigs of RAM, I finally stopped the distro hopping, and I've been on Mate when I'm not on Fedora. So basically, I use Fedora at home, and I have Mate on my machines at work. And really just wanted to start off by talking about what I think is one of the greatest features of Mate and hasn't been mentioned yet, is the community that has been fostered. The community is incredible. They've provided little, one community member, I forget who it was, actually provided me with a little Python program to get away to eliminate a little annoyance I had with a constant reminder that my battery was low on my wireless mouse, and solve that issue. And just the community is very responsive in the forums that they have. That is truly one of the greatest features of Ubuntu Mate, in my opinion, is the amazing community that is developed around the desktop and the software. I don't have really any complaints about Mate itself. I did run it all week this week, and I found a number of bugs. I have logged all of them as bug reports. So I have done that, and made bug reports for every single one of them. None of them are showstoppers though, and some of them are ones that you're just not going to run into unless you have the unique setup that I have. I have 2 monitors, my laptop monitor, and then I have a desktop monitor at a standing desk that I'm at right now, actually. and I have them stacked vertically. And that's what creates the problem, because when you have a panel on the bottom of the primary screen, which is my top screen, it does funny things to the window below it. And I don't know if there ever will be a fix for some of those things. For example, you have windows that when you maximize them vertically on the primary screen, they'll go actually behind the panel. There's some other workarounds I tried this week, but those create some of the same problems. I was encouraged by one of the community members, we'll try Plank, but Plank actually has the same problems, or creates new problems. With Plank on the bottom, when I have it so it stays on all the time, because it's really hard to find that little spot between the two screens when they're vertically like that, to make the panel reappear and not auto hide. So I usually decheck the auto hide feature. And when you do that, then you can't move an app from your primary window when Plank is open and the unhide feature down to your secondary window at all. So I've logged bugs for all of those issues, but like I said, I think it has to do with the fact that you have a panel that is on the border of the two screens vertically that's causing the main issue. And then the other bug that I came up with as well that I found was there's a hint when it comes to the HUD feature that was kind of unclear for me. And so I logged a bug report, just seeking some, wondering if we could clarify the little hint text that's there for the enable HUD feature. Took me a while for it to kind of click that you press the left Alt key, because it's put on there as Alt_L. And looking at too many keyboard shortcuts, I kind of thought, oh, Alt L? No, that doesn't work. Alt Shift L? No, that doesn't work. And then I realized it was capital L. And then when you look in the user guide, which is awesome, by the way, that's another great feature of Ubuntu Mate, is the guide that comes with it is fantastic. When you look in there, there's no reference at all to the fact that it has to be the left Alt key. The right Alt key on your keyboard is going to do nothing for the HUD. Only the left one will activate it. And then this is another ongoing issue that I don't know if they can fix either. The HUD doesn't work with Firefox, but that's been like that for a while. So the bugs that I logged, none of them are showstoppers, and they might not be able to be fixed because of just the way things work.
I think this you saying about the bugs you filed with the specific orientation of your monitors and how you had them laid out. I had a similar bug in GNOME Shell. Well, it's not similar, but it manifests itself in a similar way, in that I had my monitors one above the other, and one of them was the primary, and this was triggering a bug in GNOME Shell, and it's fixed now. But I think the fact that you've filed these bugs highlights the fact that something that people say a lot of the time is, oh, I don't need to file a bug, somebody else will have seen this. And it's the biggest mistruth in open source when people say, oh, someone else will have seen this, because especially when you're talking about monitor orientations, because people have weird esoteric ways in which they arrange their monitors. And the fact that you said, you've got this one above that one, and one of them is the primary, all it takes is for the developer to only test it with the other monitor being the primary, and your use case was never tested. And people could have 2 or 3 monitors arranged in all kinds of wacky ways. One of them may be rotated, they might be next to each other, they might be above each other, stuff like that. The developers don't have the opportunity to test every single combination. And so the fact that you're providing feedback about a specific use case and a specific orientation of the monitors that triggers this problem is gold, absolute gold. I love it. So thank you.
Yeah, that is helpful. Not a screen orientation I've ever tested stacked. I understand exactly what you've described though, so I can try and reproduce that. And with regards to Firefox and HUD support, the menu models that used to exist in Firefox that the HUD was able to interrogate are no longer in upstream Firefox anymore. So it's simply not possible to introspect the menus in the way that are required in order to populate the HUD anymore. And it's been that way for a bit over a year now. So that's unlikely to get reinstated, I think.
I did note also in my bug report that, that might be something you want to take out of the Ubuntu guide, because the animated GIF that's used is Firefox as the example for the use of the HUD. And clearly that's not going to work and probably won't work. So,
yeah, that's a good observation.
All right. Jeff, you want to get in on this? Jeff. All right. Anybody else want to get in on this?
Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just getting something. Right. So I was a little bit late with watching Ubuntu, watching last week's episode. I watched it on Monday. Within 5 minutes, I installed Ubuntu Mate. I've been using it all week, and I love it. Not the first time. By no means the first time, but I just love it. If someone said to me, you must use a distribution which you have to use the rest of your life, Ubuntu Mate will do me fine. And Martin, I'm fine with green.
Thank you for the kind words.
Well, if you guys were to, and I'll ask you, Jeff, and maybe Steve, if you guys were to give somebody a distro, I know, Steve, that you have, Fedora and Ubuntu Mate on your machines. What are the reasons why you would give this Ubuntu Mate to a new user or to a friend or whatever over another distro?
Me personally, I would give Mate probably over Fedora, just because I find that Ubuntu Mate is often the nicest compromise between ease of use and feature rich, and also resource usage on the particular system. A lot of the people that I recommend Linux to are people who are running it on used older hardware. And I know that's not a focus of Mate, and I think some of my hardware is starting to get a little too old for Mate as well. I hope I can keep it running for a while. I uninstalled GNOME software to give myself a little more of my RAM back, and got rid of Dropbox Kaja as well to get some of my RAM back, because I'm limited to just the 4 gigs, and I was starting up with 1.6 gigs, like 43% of it gone before I even opened a program. But that's why I would encourage using Mate. I love using Fedora as well on my home machine. If I could probably find a way that I could use my gifts and talents to contribute meaningfully to the Mate project, I'd probably run Mate on everything, because it's just a solid distro every single time. The upgrade path has been fantastic. I upgraded this machine from 1910 to 20.4. Didn't have any issues with the upgrade. Just a real solid distro that you can count on, and it's easy to help people with if they have trouble.
Now that's pretty interesting. So you use Fedora? Do you use like stock Fedora GNOME?
Yeah, stock Fedora workstation. Yep.
So like that is like two different paradigms where most people wouldn't correlate the two. So how do you? Like I said, you wouldn't find most people using either Mate or GNOME. So how does that work for you?
Well, for me, I'm happy with any distro that does a great job with whatever desktop environment they run, even if it's a window manager. As long as they set it up nice and it's got some sane defaults, I can be right at home. So desktop, the desktop environment or window manager environment doesn't matter too much. I'm not a huge fan of tiling window managers. I could probably learn to live with one of those too if I wanted to, but I'm pretty much happy in every desktop environment as long as there's some sane defaults to begin with. And with Mate and Mate Tweak, you can make your desktop look like anything. Now, I will admit my preferred is just to leave Ubuntu Mate with a familiar layout that it comes with by default. I think that's great. And yeah, it's different from GNOME, but that doesn't bother me.
Perfect.
But that's great if you're giving it to somebody else. Oh, if they really want something that looks more like Windows, you can use the Redmond layout.
Yep. Jeff?
Yeah, that's exactly what I do, actually. I was about to say that. I use the Redmond layout simply because it makes more sense to me than the traditional GNOME 2 panel layout. But other than that, everything Steve said, and to coin a phrase, it just works.
Mm-hmm. All right. Who else wants to get in on Ubuntu Mate? EB in the house.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Hope everybody's safe and well. Lovely to see you all. Rocco looking gorgeous as always do, just saying.
Hi, EB.
Born salesman he is. All right, JJ, you wanted to get in on Ubuntu Mate. JJ.
I'm right here. Totally.
Totally.
Yeah, so I sort of have a little bit of a similar experience to Steve because I've been coinciding with Ubuntu 2004. I've been having a desk set up with multiple monitors, and I'm sort of experiencing some similar panel issues that Steve has been experiencing. Also, I've been noticing across Ubuntu's. I mean, I've just jumped from Ubuntu Budgie to Ubuntu Mate this week, and I've noticed that it's a little bit difficult for for Ubuntu to detect higher resolution, higher refresh rates on monitors. I have a 165 hertz large screen monitor for one of my monitors, and for some reason it can only run at 60 hertz. And also, it also supports FreeSync, so I'm not sure if that's still a work in progress at this moment. Yeah, but generally, I've been having good luck with Ubuntu Mate. I've been generally pleased with its support, and I did have a slight thing with one of my older monitors where if I ran it in Marco, the adaptive GPU compositor, there would be vertical lines going across my screen, all three of my screens. And I would have to either run I would run the non-adaptive GPU compositor, but it would cause video to have a sync, like some sort of a vertical sync issue on YouTube and other video services like that. So I had to install Compton to mitigate that. So I might try to do some troubleshooting before later Biddle to see if I can compensate for that. But all in all, again, Ubuntu Mate is a great experience. Maybe it's just me and my weird hardware.
What graphics card do you have, or GPU?
I have a AMD Ryzen 5 laptop with built-in Radeon graphics, and also I'm using it doesn't support Thunderbolt, but it uses the DisplayPort over USB-C standard. If that narrows it down a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, not a configuration I've tested, but useful to know all the same.
All right. Anybody else want to get in on Ubuntu Mate? Shickle.
It's pretty cool, man. So I actually didn't know a lot of the key bindings for like moving windows and workspaces and all that existed until I think Bill mentioned it to me. And it was kind of revolutionary because this whole time, like, I've been doing everything by keybinds, but when I would go back to Mate, like, I just didn't know it was there. So I would just be dragging my mouse around and doing stuff like that. But as soon as I found it, it was just perfect because it was exactly the kind of workflow that I've gotten used to available to me in a desktop that I didn't even know had it. And it was like finding like a bottle of soda, right, that's been unopened, but like, I don't know where I'm going with that analogy, but it was really exciting. Because it just fit my workflow perfectly. And without key bindings, I really just don't use workspaces. But now that I have key bindings for that, I have like 20 workspaces set up, and it's really a problem. So it's wonderful because I'm comfortable with it now. Like, it's been a great experience, and it's been far more stable than any past release of Mate I've ever used. And I know that that's because there's been a ton of work being poured into fixing all these little issues that have been popping up. And it makes it to where I don't worry about changing my panel layouts anymore because it just works. And I don't worry about doing all kinds of things like that because it works. And it's really good to see, like, a lot of improvements. I'm impressed.
Martin, I have a question for you, personal bug question. My dad runs Ubuntu Mate. Right now, he's still on 1804. Switching.
You're a terrible son, Rocco.
So, am I missing it somewhere? So, normally you can right click on the menu in the Redmond layout and switch the icon. In 1804 versions, you can't. It didn't resize the icon the right way, so it would be like overblown or something. So we had to find an icon that was the exact size it needed. And I was just looking in 2004 here, and I can't seem to find where to change the icon.
Yeah, we ditched the changing the icon thing because what we actually did was fixed the behavior so it actually scales the icon correctly in the first place.
So you can't have a custom icon then?
No, we axed some features that were, where there was it was masking an underlying, issue, and we fixed the underlying issue and then removed the hacky workaround that existed, which was, pick your own icon.
Okay. All right, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I'm really glad that Shiko brought up the keyboard shortcuts. If people have not looked at the Ubuntu Mate keyboard shortcuts, they have some of the most amazing keyboard shortcuts of any distro out of the box. And that is another fantastic reason. It's not a tiling window manager, but you can do so many cool things. My favorite is moving an app that you have on one workspace to another workspace with, let me think here. I think it's Control, Shift, and Arrow key, if I remember correctly. It's just got some killer keyboard shortcuts that I highly recommend you look into.
He stole them all from Unity.
I did. I actually,
well done.
Except for the ones that you use to do quarter tiling, which there is a bit of add-on software for Mac OS, and I can't remember what it's called. I was trying because originally I'd set those key bindings up to use the 10 key, so they were all bindings to use a 10 key. And then about a year ago, it occurred to me none of my keyboards have a 10 key anymore because none of my the desktop keyboards do and none of my laptops did. So those key bindings didn't work. And I was like, well, how do you put key bindings to, quarter tile things when you haven't got a 10 key? And I did some Googling around, and there's a Mac extension that does quarter tiling. And they had their listing of what their key bindings were, and they were very sensible. So I ripped those off from whatever that tool is and put those in. So that saves you $69 because that's how much that extension for macOS cost.
Nice. All right. Anybody else? All right. If nobody else wants to go for Ubuntu Mate, we are
just one like side thing in the chat on YouTube. Someone's asked, Trooper-ish has asked, quarter tiling would be cool in Ubuntu proper, and I figure given we've got Martin here, Martin, like you've implemented it in Ubuntu Mate, can you make sure it's implemented in Ubuntu proper as well, please?
So all I implemented in Ubuntu Mate was the key binding to the existing functionality, which supported which had quarter tiling. There is no quarter tiling capability in GNOME Shell at the moment. So the first thing that needs to happen is that feature needs to be developed.
So, all right, Martin. So how did we do? How did we hit on all the features of the new features of Mate?
Yeah, I think so. We had Tony was here earlier, who's got a distaste for green, and I pointed out that thanks to Luke Horwell, you've now got themes and backgrounds in every color imaginable now, so you can put that one to rest. And I suppose I hear it a lot. Tony is not a voice on his own there talking about Ubuntu Mate looks old-fashioned. I think some of that comes from that we're still sporting a theme that's derived from the ambience and radiance themes, which have been around for a decade, I think now. So changing the theme for an LTS is not the thing to do, right? What you want to do is you want to, fix all those last little issues, which we put a load of effort into for 1910 and the same for 2004. So the theme remained the same, but certainly looking forward now, I would like to create a default theme based around Yaru and move things forward there, and it's something I've briefly discussed with the Yaru team, and I think there would be a nice bit of continuity between Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate if they were using a theme that is ostensibly the same, albeit Tony, sorry, still going to be green.
I was going to say it's still going to be green, right? Well,
but yes, I think the big innovations, the new features mostly happened in 1910, and a lot of bug fixes, and the 2004 cycle was a continuation of fixing those bugs. 1804 was a bit of a miss because, as Schickel pointed out, there were lots of little rough edges, and by themselves they weren't showstoppers, but in aggregate it just soured the whole experience, and that made me sad. So really 2004 is now, I'm very pleased with it. There are still, of course, feature parity gaps, but with bigger desktops like GNOME and KDE, but in terms of the stability and it actually working well, I'm very happy about where it is now. That Bill and the team have got a list of bugs that need attention, and we'll be adding some of Steve's into that. I've just opened them all, by the way. Thanks, JJ, for putting those in the Zoom chat. So yeah, continuing to ace those rough edges and those bugs. I think that's a good place for Ubuntu Mate to focus. And starting with the 2010, we'll review the visuals. Maybe we'll get away from being old-fashioned and an antique.
Well, I wanted to bring that up, and I think part of, you mentioned part of it was the theme, but I think also part of it is the traditional layout. And now you, I believe, tried to change that before, or floated the idea of changing that at the default before, and I don't, is that something that you would do?
So personally, I never used the familiar layout. Familiar was kind of a compromise. So I wanted to change it to something like the Cupertino or Pantheon layout, using Planck as a bottom bar and then a single bar at the top, getting away from that dual panel arrangement. Not because I wanted it to look like macOS, but over 10 years ago, that was how I used to run GNOME 2 with, at the time it was Docky as the little thing, but I had Docky at the bottom and a single panel at the top just for status indications. And that's my preference. When I I made the change in before it was an alpha release in one of the versions, and some people in the community just lost the plot over it, got really bent out of shape over it. So the familiar layout was kind of a compromise, because I really felt that the default experience had to have super key activation everywhere. You just had to be able to hit super key, start typing, hit return, and just launch applications and get a very quick workflow. Not having that, which is what the traditional layout, doesn't have any of that super key integration, that really does feel old-fashioned. I'd certainly be tempted to change the default layout, and that's something I'll discuss with the team this cycle. See if we can't make a couple of changes to sort of step things up a little bit.
All right, Bill, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so one of the things that has been mentioned, there are a lot of bugs with Ryzen GPUs, and we have a couple fixes, workarounds in the forums that are listed. There is an Xorg upstream bug that is targeted, from what I can see, to come in as an SRU in 2004.1. So that issue is known. There are a couple workarounds to look at, and they're listed in the forum. That's one of the big ones. And we do have an issue with foreign language and icon stuff. But the AMD one, it's fixed in upstream, and we just have to get it into. It affects not only us; it affects Ubuntu Studio, and I've had reports that it does something with Budgie as well. So just wanted to put that out there. And Chicken and Steve mentioned the key bindings, and I would just say go look at the release notes. People don't read them. The release notes have a ton of information. If you're a new user, it explains a lot of stuff. There are a lot of cool features that we haven't touched on, and they're all in the release notes. So I would just urge everyone to go read those. But that's it.
Yeah, I mean, some of those features, for example, I see Jill here. I know Jill gets value from this feature, and that was working with Stuart Langridge on Magnus, which is a screen magnifier, which we worked on about 6 months ago. You know, it's no accident that I'm interested in software for visually impaired users, because my cousin is extremely visually impaired, and she is an Ubuntu Mate user, and one of the reasons why I pay close attention to visual accessibility of the Mate desktop. And another feature that I really like is the notification center and the do not disturb stuff. Again, that was introduced in 1910. But these were little features that really sort of chipped away at those sort of rough edges of, you know, people like, oh, this is one reason why I wouldn't stick with it. You know, if you just keep adding a few of these little features, you'll find that, you know, people stick with things. So as Bill says, there's a ton of detail in the release notes. And we're always keen to get your feedback, because it helps inform us as to what we fix or improve next time round.
Chickle.
So I have a question for you, Martin, in regards to the accessibility for visual impairment and whatnot. Like, is that why system alerts are in stereo, and depending on where they come from, that's like how the sound is displayed? Or,
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And it's also why the login sound is enabled by default. You know, that's an audible prompt to alert visually impaired users that the login screen is there.
Very nice. Toss, are you here, sir?
I am here. Can you hear me?
It's been an age since you've been on Biddle, dude.
I know. Well, you know, I had to pay my respects to the godfather of Ubuntu Mate, so I had to come in. Hi, well, Martin. How are you, sir?
Very well.
I see you smiling. It's been a while since we've spoken. Yeah. See, it has
been a long time.
It has. Me and Martin spoke, I'm going to guess 3 years ago, maybe before Ubuntu Mate exploded in its popularity, at least how I see it. But the last 30 days, because of this lockdown here in the States, I've had some time. So I've been testing a lot of distributions. And I have to tell you, I keep going back to Ubuntu Mate. And I'm telling you this as a Windows user. Yes, I still use Windows, maybe 10% of the time, you know. But I keep going back because it just works. I know that when I install it, Martin, and do the updates and reboot, you know, I'm good to go. I don't have to solve a problem or fix an issue. For me, it just doesn't exist, you know. Now, I'm not saying that if I switch to Ubuntu or something else, I would find problems, but I keep coming back to Ubuntu Mate because I use a customized panel. I have a panel at the top, and I think Ubuntu Mate has the best weather applet, period. Now, somebody said, geez, Tars, why don't you just look out the window? Sure, right in the middle of a live stream, I'll just leave my seat, go to the window. No, I want my weather applet anyway. It just works. I don't know how else to explain it, Martin, but since the beginning, you know, Ubuntu Mate. Now, I do have Linux Mint Mate on one of my ThinkPads, because Linux Mint, I believe, is still offering 32-bit. So I installed that, and it's fine. There really isn't that much of a big difference. But on my main Dell machine here, I mean, I've tested maybe 10 distributions here in 30 days. I keep coming back to this. So I just call it as I see it. So I don't have my camera rigged up, but I do have a glass of wine. So salute to you, Martin. Cheers.
You're welcome. Thank you for the kind words. I over the years, I've heard lots of people say, "Oh, you know, Ubuntu Mate just works. It's rock solid," and all of those. And it always made me squirm a little bit because I always thought about all the dirty little corners where there were bugs and problems and all the rest of it. And these days, when I hear people say, "Oh, it just works for me," I feel much more comfortable with accepting that status because of the effort that, you know, we've put in particular Bill and the QA team over the last year to actually really polishing it and making it you know, reliable and stable. So
well, you know, I'm you know,
getting there.
Maybe there are a bug here or there that I haven't noticed. I mean, I understand nothing's perfect, but I'm not into highly customized tweaks on a desktop. Once I set it, I forget it. You know, because I'm afraid if I start tweaking around, fiddling around, gee, now what did I break, you know? But that being said, one panel at the top. And sometimes I may launch Cairo Dock just to add a little bit of flair to it, but that's about it. But I haven't seen any crashes. Yeah. No,
Cairo Dock, is that still around?
Yeah. I think I have it installed. I'm pretty sure I got it. Yeah. Yeah, it's still around. Yeah, it works fine. Yeah.
Crikey, I haven't.
It's actually my favorite dock.
No, it's still
when I use it, yeah, but it is still there. Yes, and yeah, me and Uncle Guido took care of Cairo Dock. It's all good, Martin. I'm just kidding, but it's still around, and I don't use it all the time, but it worked. In fact, I was just testing. I downloaded eLive OS. I guess it has the Enlightenment desktop. I'm not that familiar. That has a version of Cairo Dock in it, and it works. So, but. Anyway, Ubuntu Mate, it just works. That's why I said 2 years ago, it's my Linux gold standard. And I think Quids Up agreed with me back when he posted a, So, and I think he uses exclusively Linux. I think I could be wrong. So, you know, he would know a little bit more than me, obviously. But yeah, no problem recommending this to a friend of mine, and of course, once I say Ubuntu Mate, they go, you know, I have to explain it, but it's all good, Martin. So thank you.
Yeah, I unwittingly created the most unpronounceable distro.
It fits right into Linux, dude.
That's fine. Well, look, you could have called it Deadbeef OS. I mean, really, come on. I'll just leave it there.
Just call it.
Well done, mate.
All right. So, I guess we have got to everybody that wanted to speak about Ubuntu Mate. If not, raise your hands. Otherwise, Martin, thank you so much. And thank you to the whole Ubuntu Mate team for everything that you did, everything that they did, for all of the work they put in. And it doesn't get said enough. There's never a time where you can say, well, I thanked people too much. I don't think the developers that are in the community get thanked enough. And I really appreciate all of the efforts.
Well, thank you for that sentiment. But you're right. Saying thank you to developers goes an awfully long way. You'll find developers throughout the Ubuntu community really appreciate it, even if it's in IRC. If they get a thank you for something that they're helping you with or have helped you with, goes an awfully long way. So yes, thank you all for your kind words and thank you for your feedback. Duly noted. We'll see what we can do to improve things in 6 months' time.
Very nice. All right, that is our thoughts on Ubuntu Mate 2004. This week, if you would like to follow along with us, we are going to try the next Ubuntu flavor on the list, and that is Kubuntu 2004. So that will be not our challenge. We got to come up with a different name. Like, that's our topic, our first topic for next week. How's that? Is Kubuntu 2004.
Distro of concern?
we gotta like put a poll together or something and come up with a new name instead of a distro challenge, because that's a little too dated.
Scary.
Yeah, scary.
Well, and it shouldn't be a challenge these days, I don't think.
You're right. It is totally the wrong wording, dude. Totally the wrong wording.
It should be distro uphill challenge. That's what it should be, people. I'm telling you.
We want to roll the clock back to 1996, maybe. But, these days,
Come on, EB.
But have we rolled it forward? Really?
I think so. I think it's a lot better than it used to be.
Really?
Much better.
Okay. So
much better.
The past 5 weeks on Discord, me and a whole bunch of people have been playing games and using Discord and live streaming. Okay? And we've all flicked between Windows 10 and another distro. Right? Be it Ubuntu, be it Arch, Gen 2, Slack, what, doesn't matter. Right? And there's 2 constants. Constant number 1 is on Windows, everything just works 99% of the time. On Linux, it doesn't matter who it is, what distro or what based, there are constantly issues every single day. Discord crashes out, the audio drops out, the game doesn't work. So when you say about doing a distro challenge, it's a lot more than just lobbing a distro on a PC and say, yeah, looks nice. Oh yeah, license interface, great. You hammer something for 5 weeks and you start to realize why so many enthusiasts use Linux and the rest of the planet use Windows. Because for whatever Windows is or isn't, it just works.
Well, EB, I think that obviously you want to give whatever distro that you would try, you would want to give it at least 30 days in order to test it out completely and say, I've tested it and it works for me in this situation. But that's way out of the scope of this show, this panel, these people. So, I mean, there's no way that we can do that.
I agree with you, but we're not just talking gaming here. You know, you load Windows 10 up, you install Leonflix, you install whatever you like, right? Windows, bang, it works. Great. Load your VPN up, it just works. Go and choose another distro, and it's pick an answer out the air as to whether it's going to work.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree with you there a little bit, EB. I only boot into Windows to play Call of Duty. Okay, so I don't use Windows on a regular basis, but when I do boot into it, I can't say that it's problem free. Whether that be one of the pieces of software that doesn't, work correctly or properly. We'll just say, for example, we'll just use BattleNet because that's a gaming platform. I have had BattleNet consistently crashing on me in the last few weeks. So I wouldn't say, maybe for your instance and maybe for this specific time frame, you've had no problems with Windows, but I can't put a blanket statement on it to say Windows just works all the time, because it's really not about Windows. It's about the programs on Windows and whether they work or not.
And you just nailed it. And this is the absolute killer, right? Why is it that programs work flawlessly on Windows and yet they're constantly a pain in the backside on Linux?
Well, I wouldn't say they work flawlessly on Windows. I will say that there are issues on both platforms. There may be, and maybe that's just because I got, rose-colored glasses on, there may be a little less issues on Windows. But again, you got to go back to the actual programs and the developers that are programming those applications to have them make it work for Linux. It's not just about there's a lot of programs that come over to Linux. They don't maybe work 100%. And then we blame Linux for it rather than blaming, the actual program. So for example, Discord. I've had issues with Discord on Linux. But is that Linux's fault or is that Discord's fault?
No, but how many times do you say that, Rocco, on apps before you turn around and say, well, do you know what? I'll just use Windows because everything just works. You use
So
Discord
use
on
Windows,
Linux.
then.
Yeah.
Use Windows then.
No, you're missing the whole point.
What is? I'm not because you've entered into a conversation with. Well, if you let me speak, then I'll tell you what. you've come into a room full of people who are Linux enthusiasts, and you're telling us that Windows is better than the choice that we've made. And some of us who work on this thing, I've worked on this for more than 10 years. Martin's worked on this for a long time. You may be right. It may be true that Windows is fantastic. So what? What good does that do telling us that Windows is better? I could tell you that my Bosch washing machine is better than your Hotpoint washing machine. What good does that do? It doesn't help anyone in any way.
I'm not saying
You could argue the same. You could argue the same with Mac as well.
No, I'm not saying, Alan, that Windows is better. Everybody's saying the wheels moved round on Linux and moved forward. I'm saying, has it? In reality, has it? Are we any nearer now to a Windows replacement for a Linux enthusiast than what we were 5 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Leaps and bounds further ahead.
Yes.
5 years ago,
okay,
there was no Discord. There was no Steam. There was no decent Skype client that had parity with the other platforms. There was no Spotify. The list goes on. There was no Visual Studio Code, and that's a cross-platform thing, but we didn't have an answer to that. The JetBrains suite, for example, there is just a huge plethora of software available today on Linux that closes the application parity gap significantly. You started this conversation by saying you've been playing games and live streaming them on Linux using probably OBS, which is the de facto standard tool across all platforms. Just listen to yourself. You were playing games on Linux and live streaming them using Linux. You weren't doing
Discord,
that 5 years ago.
On Discord. Yeah, that's very true. I accept all that. But what I'm saying is, with constant issues on a daily basis, to the point where it's almost
on
unusable.
every computing platform ever, though. Constant issue today for me is printers are still. I'm going to curb my language here. Rocco nearly did it.
Thank you
Printers
very much.
are still rubbish. After decades of playing with printers, they are as broken today as they were 30 years ago. Today, printer stops eating paper when you want to print. So in my opinion, printers haven't moved on in the last 30 years. But if you ask anyone that works on printers, they will tell you about all of the advancements that have happened in printing in the last 10 years. I think it's grossly unfair to claim that the Linux desktop ecosystem has not moved forwards in the last 5 years when it evidently has.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. That's exactly the point I was trying to make.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Nope,
Alan.
it's okay.
Take something as simple as Pulse Audio. A few years ago, before Pulse Audio existed, it was not possible for you to have YouTube open while you have a Skype call open. You could do one thing with the audio system, and that was it. And now you're telling me you've got a video game open, playing audio, while another application is capturing your desktop audio and desktop video and the audio from your microphone and piping that over the internet to your friends to be able to see it at the same time. Yes, it has moved forward.
But incredibly flaky and incredibly unreliable, Alan. That was the point I'm trying to make. Whereas Windows, it's constant. I'm not saying Windows is perfect. I'm not saying it's better than Linux. I'm just saying. And I was going to sum up just by saying, over the 5 weeks with all the different distros, in my personal experience, and everybody's mileage is different, the most reliable one was Ubuntu 20.04.
Shickle, go ahead.
I wanted to say.
So I definitely think that everybody has issues with their computer, and other people will not experience those issues, or other people will, and it doesn't matter what system it is. Obviously, there's always going to be issues. My experience personally has kind of been as somebody who liked Windows and is a total nut in that regard. I haven't had the kind of issues on Linux that would make me think that Windows is necessarily better. There are certain things that it's I feel like we miss out on, and it's mostly just because certain application creators, those companies work closely with NVIDIA for certain features and ridiculous stuff like that. But realistically, I can get DaVinci Resolve on Linux and it works most of the time better than it does on Windows for me, which means that like, while I would love to use a FOSS editor, but I don't have to choose either, right? Like, if I need it, I have it. And that's just not something I could do a few years ago.
Yes, but you can look across the board, and I mean, I'm sorry to say, but you would have to be ignoring everything that's happened in the last few years to say that, you know, Linux is no further than it was a few years ago. It's not perfect. It's got issues, but everything that you guys have already listed, plus the NVIDIA drivers. Do you remember how much of a pain the NVIDIA drivers were? And now they come along with your distro when you check the box. Like, all of these things, I can install a distro. I can install Ubuntu Mate in under 5 minutes and have a running desktop. That couldn't be said a few years ago. That can't even be said for Windows right now. So, I don't know. I think we've come a long way. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I mean, I started off with saying how Mate was my first entry into Linux desktop and living with it. And I remember when I first installed it, it was probably a 4 or 5 try type thing. And I was just kind of praying and hoping on the last one, and it worked. And then when I got in, it was, oh, I got to go find this. And then how do I install this? And I set this up an hour before the show today. It installed, it recognized I had a 4K panel. It just showed up. It just worked. It was on 12-hour time. Thank you, Martin. I spend more time switching from 24-hour time to 12-hour time on distros. But that's
a bug. It's meant to be 24-hour time.
Don't file it. Please don't file that bug. Nobody file that bug.
Leave it. Leave it.
Going to file it now. That's
But
just bad code.
I feel like we're the enthusiasts in here, or we're developers, or coders, or whatever we do. The average person, my mom struggles to print off of her iPad. One of the most widely distributed pieces of hardware that exists. It's still a struggle. I think if you put these desktops in front of anyone, our normal user who browses the web, who wants to check their email, who wants to watch a little YouTube and get on Facebook, Linux does all of those things. Now, when we get into our little niche areas, which is niche, even if you're a big time gamer and you've got to set up OBS and stream and all this stuff, that's difficult on Windows. That's difficult on anywhere. And I think those are niche cases, not the general purpose. When Linux as a desktop has come so far, it is amazing. And it's thanks to all the little things like that Martin and Alan and all these other developers have worked on that make it just a pleasure to work with now, where it used to be oh yeah, I got it to work. This is cool. Look what I can do. Now it's just, oh yeah, it's done.
It's almost boring, ain't it?
It just happens. It just happens.
Bearded Wonder, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know how long Bob's been using Linux, but I've been using it since around 2007 when I got into it. And back in the day, if you wanted to get audio and video codecs and your Wi-Fi running, you had all these NDIS wrappers and you had to do the Medibuntu repositories and all that. It'd take you hours to get things working. Now, like you just said, you can install a distro in 5-10 minutes, do your updates, and all your hardware works. Now, if that ain't progress, I don't know what is.
Well, I think eBay's... Go ahead, Martin.
No, you finish your point.
Well, I think eBay's been using Linux for a long time as well. And to be honest with you, he's just starting up the crowd. He likes to do that. So. Anyway, go ahead, Martin.
So I find it amusing when Tony says back in the day in 2007, because my measure of like things moving on is, in the 90s when I first started using Linux. I can remember on one of my ThinkPads, I had to boot into DOS, load the drivers for the sound card to get the sound card in Sound Blaster emulation mode, and then warm boot into a Linux kernel from the DOS partition in order that the sound card could then be detected by the Linux kernel as a sound blaster. So, you know, we've come an awful long way.
Hey,
over
Sound
the
Blaster
years.
cards were terrible. Well, not terrible. They were a pain in the neck, even on Windows back then.
Can I
Right,
just
but this
say,
wasn't a Sound Blaster. This was an M-Wave card
Oh.
that you had to configure as an emulated thing.
Somebody's got some echo going on. I don't know who that is.
I hear it too.
I
I was gonna say, I bought a Sound Blaster card not knowing anything about sound cards or their support on Linux in general, and I'm so glad I didn't do this 10, 20 years ago, because it just worked, and I feel like I would have been in a bad place.
Yes, I had Sound Blaster cards for a while, and they were a pain, regardless of what you were using. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gamer, so a lot of the things that people used to game on, that they couldn't game with on Linux wouldn't be a factor. But I moved to Linux 21 years ago because Windows 98 was such a mess. And Windows is better, but Linux is better. And I use Windows at work because I have to. It's not my decision. But when I'm not at work, virtually as we all are now, if we're working at all, it's Linux. 99% of the time when I'm not using a Mac, because I like those too. But even with the Mac, you know, I had a problem with a printer about 2 months ago, which was nothing to do with Mac and nothing to do with Linux. It was the printer. Other than that, so I think it's quite an exaggeration to say there's constantly problems with every type of Linux. You'd have to go out of your way to find something like Slackware. If you're a new user, you'd have to go out of your way to find something like Slackware, even something like some of the more esoteric Debian-based Linuxes. So Ubuntu Mate, most of the Ubuntu's, as long as you like the desktop environment, they work fine most of the time. They really do.
Yeah, and I think I go back to partially that this is a lot about the programs themselves rather than anything. Because, like, for example, to EB's point, I don't have a problem with Windows specifically. When I boot into Windows, Windows itself works fine. It's usually a program that gives me trouble. DJ, go ahead.
So is my audio okay, first of all?
It is.
Okay, good. So I was just going to make a comment that I have a question first for Martin. Martin, how many lines of code do you think you integrate into your kernel, into the distributions that you release as of, just a guess, or unless you know specifically?
Are you talking about the Ubuntu kernels?
Yes.
What changes that we're making to the upstream kernel? Is that what you're asking?
No, the entire distribution as a whole. So you're gathering in packages from developers and other projects, and I know that you folks also work hand in hand with some of the developers on those projects as well. But my point is that based on the amount of code that you have, how much time do you think it would take to actually test it, if you had to test it?
Well, we do test it.
No, I mean thoroughly. I know better than that. There's no way that anybody tests all that code.
Well, we test.
We'd all be dead.
We test the products. So the things that Canonical produces have tests for the various products and the desktop. So the desktop goes through automated integration testing, and then as we near releases, obviously, we have some manual testing as well. But we can't test all 30,000 packages across all four of the archives, because we don't ship all of those packages. But and also a large number of those packages are maintained by the community. So some of the onus of responsibility is on those package maintainers, you know, to ensure the quality. And there are checks and balances that exist to, you know, help ensure that there's a level of quality at the outset there as well. Every package in main has auto package tests, you know, unit tests and what have you, and a large number in the other archives do too.
So just as a comparison, when I worked on Unix, we had about 11 million lines of code. And the joke used to be that if we wrote a program, it had to run in less than 2 hours before the machine would crash. So has it come a long way? Yes, it's come a long way. And it's amazing to me how stable Linux is, considering how many packages that you just described, Martin, that you have to bring in and integrate into a distribution to make it work. And that's amazing to me that it's as good as it is.
Yes, and I think this is the challenge, not just for Linux distributions, but just modern open source development, right? You think about what happens when if you're a node developer, let's say, if you've ever, you know, done an npm install of, you know, an application, just look at all of those modules that get sucked in order to support that application. That is thousands of lines of code, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of lines of code potentially that you're now about to run on your system that has been contributed by tens of thousands of developers from all around the world, none of whom you know. So you've now got this corpus of software on your machine which makes up this application. And where did it come from? Who was responsible for it, and what's it going to do? So this is the challenge now for open source. Is we are the lingua franca for the way software is developed in the modern world. But how do we solve this problem of where did the software come from? Is it behaving in the right way? And part of the solution to that, this is why it's no mistake that, you know, Flatpaks and snaps exist. They are addressing some of the same problems, which is about confining the applications in order to run them in an isolated, trusted fashion, because you can't necessarily trust where the software came from.
All right, Schickel?
What I was going to say on that, because like I'm not a kernel developer. Obviously, the most I've done is like try and nag upstream changes and patch them into current versions, which didn't end well. But I think one of the benefits in regards to Linux in particular is that upstream kernel developers are very heavily focused on not breaking things in user space, which is super helpful, because then when things start coming down, like the Ubuntu kernel developers, obviously they want to make sure the same kind of things are true and they're not breaking things. But I think because it starts off in a place where not breaking things is the priority, especially for user space, and then it moves down the list and they test against packages that they know that at least everybody who installs Ubuntu will at least have those packages. So those are definitely obviously tested to some extent. I feel like it's a lot easier than, I think, more chaotic development processes.
Yeah. And you know, when it comes to testing, there's a big focus within Canonical around testing the things that people are paying us to develop. So when we're talking about kernels, you know, we have hardware vendors that are shipping Ubuntu on their devices. And long before those devices come to market, we have those in our lab and we work on the enablement. And then those devices sit in the lab forevermore, hooked up to automated things. So if I wanted to now, I could log into the system and fire up any one of those and run things on it. But every time, you know, there's a new kernel revision coming into the Ubuntu archive, you know, as there is now for 2010, that kernel will be tested across that fleet of devices that go back, you know, through the support commitments that we have with those OEMs to ensure that these new kernels continue to work on those devices, and the enablement that we've done on those devices in the past continues to work into the future. We can't test every PC in the world, but if we broadly test those that we're contracted to look after, there is some guarantees there that, you know, if you've got the same or similar hardware, you're probably going to have a good experience.
All right. DJ, did you have a follow-up on that? Did I interrupt you?
No, you know, the big difference between Linux and Windows is Windows backs out of the driver support business, and they leave that to the hardware vendor. whereas Linux has taken that upon themselves. It's included in the kernel. And I know there's some shift going on right now to allow hardware development separately from the kernel, but that work. I was listening to the Lenovo guy today, and he was talking about the integration challenges for the distros that they are going to bring onto their platform. But the challenge that they have is the same that we have. They have to pass it back to the hardware developers to help develop the drivers that they need for their specific laptop or for even their desktop. So, I mean, Windows doesn't have that problem because they don't do it. They just pass it off to the vendor.
All right. Anybody else want to join in on this? Robin, what do you think about all this? What do you think about how far we have come?
I've got a feeling, a very good feeling, that it's just going to carry on getting better and better, because I've been a Linux user myself for a good 5-6 years now, and I've just, like you said, there was no Discord, there was no Skype, there was no Teams. It was just an alternative to Windows. And every time I fired up like Ubuntu, say for argument's sake, I don't know, I always headed back to Windows because I just thought, why am I in Ubuntu? What the hell can I do with it? Now, here we are at 2020. There's so much choice, so much available out there. And every time I talk about Linux to people, it's the people that moan about Windows. And every time I mention Linux, they are interested. They're like, what is this Linux I've heard so much about? And then I just say, well, just go on YouTube, watch a load of videos, get some experience with kind of how people use it. And even myself, I'm having so much, I don't know, difficult time at the moment trying to find still the right distro for me, because it's a hobby. I can't use it kind of in my day job yet, but the tools are there for me to use right now. I can use Teams, I can use Skype, I can use a Chrome, Chromium. All the stuff that I need for my day-to-day job, I can do in Linux. I don't need Windows. Why do I boot into Windows? Because my company wants me to use Cisco. That's the reason why. But apart from that, I am here at home talking to you guys now. From the moment I turn the computer on in the morning to the time I turn it off at night, it's Linux. And I just love it. I just cannot say one bad thing about it. The only real bad experiences I have with it is generally with the apps themselves. And I just say to myself, do you know what? I can do without it. Let's find an alternative, or I'll just wait a few months for a new release to come out. Linux itself, to me, I've got no gripes with, because Linux can be across everything. Linux is just the platform, the desktop environment, or the distro that you use that layers on top of it. That's where most of the issues lie for me, because you're talking about drivers. For example, no disrespect to Ferrin OS, for example, I can't get Ferrin to work on my desktop. Ubuntu, no problems at all. And the 2004 release, oh guys, come on, this is your best ever, and you guys continue to make it better and better with every release every 6 months, and I cannot disrespect you in any way over that. So this 2004 release is staying with me definitely long term, and this long-term service release that you've done recently is the best I've seen in the last 6 LTSs that I've had experience with. There's my take.
Wow. All right, Jill.
Thank you very much.
Jill, you've been in Linux for a long time. You've seen the changes that have happened over the years.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Speaking, we were talking about sound cards earlier. Setting your IRQ interrupts was actually more of a pain than it was to do in Linux. In Linux, you could just do an insmod, and it would set it up.
I have no idea what you just said.
Even back then.
Neither do I, chicken.
But yeah, to me, just like what Robin was saying, the 2004 release knocks it out of the park. This is a release I can put in front of a beginning user and they can be productive on it. So, all those little bugs have been fixed.
But think about this way. Think about this though, Jill. Is it apart from the OS itself, is it the fact that we now have access to the tools to be multi-platform? Think about Teams, for example. Teams is an example. Yeah. I'm not bothered about not having access to Word, Excel, etc., because I can do all that in a browser.
Yeah.
Teams, on the other hand, I can now quite thankfully use without any issues at all on any Linux distro, and it works perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you were saying, Robin, all the apps having DaVinci Resolve, for instance, on Linux has, Linux has always been very strong in the animation and graphics world as far the film industry goes. But it's really now brought to the desktop now with all our different options, even the open source ones. We've got Kden Live, we've got Krita, we've got GIMP, Inkscape. The new version of Inkscape is incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
just,
if that's not the best indication of it being the year of the Linux desktop, Inkscape has had a 1.0 after like 20 years. Right?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
So do we actually have a Diddle Dan?
We do.
In Biddle.
We do.
Oh wow, this is an amazing day.
Hello, hello.
It is about time you join us, dude.
Oh, there's Diddle.
So what is going on today, man?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing. Well, we are talking about Ubuntu Mate. We're talking about how far Linux has come. Tell me, how far do you think Linux has come in the last 5 years?
A very long way.
Yep.
If you consider that I used to think that Gentoo was an improvement over standard Linux.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I do apologise for butting in, Rocco, but I've got to go. Just before I go, I would like to say a massive thanks to you for hosting this show once a month and, of course, every week in the US. So thank you so much, buddy. I hope everybody here in chat and on screen keeps themselves and their families very, very safe. And one thing we can all agree on, Ubuntu 2004, in my personal humble opinion, is the best desktop Linux distro release to date. Just saying, people. But I just like to throw stuff into the mix and poke a few ribs and just see what comes out. It's very interesting. So much love to each and every one of you. Thank you, Rocco. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. Much love.
EB, thank you
BB.
so much for the great conversation. It was perfect.
Yes. I knew what he was up to.
He just puts them shots in and then drops out. What is going on here?
Wipe his Windows 10 partition now.
Right? All right. Jill, Alan was asking you about what you have behind you there in the pre-show, and I said we should probably save it for the show. So
okay.
tell us what you have behind one of the larger Tux penguins there.
Yeah. So I have several hundred computers, and there's over 100 in this room. And so behind me, I have a combination of 486s, 586s, 386s, 286s, SGI, Deck Alpha, Sun Spark workstations. I have just about everything. And under that big penguin, I have a dual Xeon workstation, which was one of my very first Xeon workstations after the first series that came out after the Pentium Pro. And yeah, I've got several full height SCSI hard drives in there. And I used to use that box for rendering.
SCSI, now there's a name from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And in fact, almost all my systems run SCSI because that's what you had to use for animation. Yeah, we needed that faster throughput. We needed that, consistent bit rate. So that was a thing.
Talk about coming away from the past. Holy
yeah.
mackerel.
yeah. And in fact, earlier you guys were asking about this monitor is a Mitsubishi Diamond Scan. And it was a really high, it was the biggest monitor you could buy at the time. It's 21 inch. and it was used in the aerospace industry. And it allowed me to run all my old machines, whether they were Mac, Sun, SGI, or PC, because you had, back in the day, they had different frequencies. So that monitor lets me adjust the frequencies in the back. There's actually little buttons for all the different, classes of computers.
You could actually ruin the monitor by getting the wrong information in.
That was one of the monitors that I had the system I had installed Slackware Linux on back in '93. That was one of the monitors I had running with it, and had to be very careful about the vertical and horizontal, refresh rates and all that. So during the install, so they didn't blow it up. Yeah, that was a thing.
Yep. All right. We are going to, I guess, move on to the next topic of interest, unless somebody else has something. Shikken, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I have two questions.
Do it.
For Jill. One, you mentioned like the high throughput and stuff of those SCSI drives. I've never experienced this, but I was curious, in relation to not only having that throughput in terms of the hardware, but did you have to use certain file system types or certain sort of layouts to also make full use of it? Or was it something you could just slap any partition on and it would work just about the same?
You did have to use different formats. Yeah, because obviously, like if you're using, back in the day, we're using Windows, FAT32 would not support my files that were the video uncompressed files that I had to do for doing movie trailers and whatnot, that were 1 gig a second.
Oh gosh.
And that was back in the 90s. So when hard drive space was a problem, and I'd have like 15 SCSI hard drives linked together just to process the information. And yeah.
That's impressive, because even now 1 gig a second is a lot.
It's impressive. Oh, and that was for 720 by 486 resolution, which is broadcast, standard back in the day.
That's so cool.
And so that's what we had to do. And so the instead of using a video format like QuickTime or MPEG, we would have to do a Targa sequence. So you do a sequence of images to send that to the studios, because we didn't have, internet with good bandwidth then.
That's so cool.
So I had,
question was, because you mentioned you could ruin your monitor by doing cool wacky things. Is it possible to make like some like laser cannon kind of thing just by intentionally breaking it up? Because that would be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, Popey and Wimpy will probably remember those X-free 86 days.
Running around with magnets was fun too.
Yeah.
I remember the interesting noises the CRT used to make as you were trying to adjust the mode lines, and I never had the sort of fabled, smoke coming out the back of the monitor, but I definitely had some impressive clunking sound going on occasion. It's struggling to compute my miscalculations.
Yeah, it was you just had to be so careful. And I was I have all the years, I've built thousands of computers and upgraded hundreds. I've never blown out my processor, never blew out my monitor, because I was always so careful and very slow and tedious at making sure I did everything perfect.
I mean,
and now it's just plug and play OS. Everything works.
Mode lines. Wasn't that hideous? Wasn't that absolutely hideous? It was a baptism of fire. I mean, you were really, if you're prepared to put up with that and the risk of physically damaging your display device by attempting to run Linux on it, and God forbid trying to get a graphical environment going on it. Then,
And then my Xorg, Wimpy would be, 3 or 4 pages sometimes if I wanted to run multiple monitors on my, like main Matrox Millenniums.
Yeah, right. And I can remember that it used to be a thing. There used to be whole websites dedicated to Xorg configurations.
Yes.
Pair up the combination of graphics card and monitor or laptop and what have you to find the appropriate. I mean, just that doesn't exist anymore, right? I mean, who's ever had to futz around with mode? I mean, it still exists. It's still in there.
Yeah, and you can still use it.
Ever had to do that in the last 10 years?
Yeah, it's amazing. And
I have to do it. I have to do it for,
For
one of the
multiple-
monitors that's behind me
Mhm.
is rubbish and doesn't expose its EDID information over the cable.
Oh,
So I have
yeah.
to still in 2020
that.
edit my xorg.com.
How old is this monitor?
Oh my
It's not like
goodness!
it's a
I would buy a
1080p
new monitor.
It's a 1080p monitor.
No,
Actually,
come
I
on.
should say, Martin, it works perfectly well under Ubuntu Martin, but connected to the Entroware Athena, it will only ever do 1680 by whatever. It won't do full HD, but connected to a different computer, it's fine. It's weird. So I have to, and every time I do it, I think, oh, it's 2020. I shouldn't still be doing this.
Yeah. I do some, I actually still make one for every one of my 3 monitor systems. And the reason is when I'm going back into Fluxbox or Window Maker, sometimes the arrangements change. So
Yep.
so I still make one, but it's a whole lot easier now.
Are you just talking about making an XOR config? You're not
Yeah.
talking about your own
Yeah.
mode lines, though.
No, I didn't have to do, actually,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a long time since I did a mode line, but the XORG conf, definitely.
Sorry, Rocco.
But
we've
mode
even
lines,
forgotten
oh
where we were
God.
going.
DJ, I wanted to ask you. You had mentioned you had said something about walking around with magnets. What were you talking about?
So you can distort the monitor signal for at least a couple of hours with a strong magnet on those old CRTs. You can
I
just
used
take
to
a
stick
magnet.
magnets on our TV. It was
Yeah.
so fun.
Yeah.
It's just for joke purposes, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Alan.
What else would I be doing it for?
Hey, Alan,
love
for
it.
some troubleshooting of that monitor, you may want to try to stick a crayon in between the connector
Yeah.
to see if
Mhm.
that works.
Crayons work well, especially under heat.
Oh boy.
If you don't know what we're talking about, you just need to go listen to the new show episode that came out. It was fantastic. And some of the
Thanks.
things you might learn might shock you. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just remembering, Wimpy, the last time I did use a mode line was 2004. So that was the last time.
I honestly genuinely thought that it was all a joke, and then I was like, oh no, they're being serious. These are real problems they're
God.
talking about.
Yeah.
This is why I'm adamant that Linux has moved on tremendously in the last 5 to 10 years, because I'm serious. Like Pulse Audio, I know Pulse Audio, when it was first introduced, people hated it because I think Ubuntu put it in too early, maybe before it was fully baked. But someone needed to test it. Why not our users? And the other thing, the automatic XORG configuration, that was just magic. I know I'm going to sound like old man shakes fist at cloud now, but it used to be horrible. And now you put a USB key in and automatically it's the right resolution, the right sync, the right, everything is and plugging an external monitor in. Like I go to conferences, obviously not right now, but I've been to conferences in the last 18 months, and it is no longer the case that someone with a Linux laptop will plug in and it won't work. They generally plug their HDMI or VGA cable in and it just does the right thing. Well, the problem is people with Apple Macs. At conferences, people plug Macs in and they cannot get the display working. The panel
every
just
single
won't light
time.
up. It's hilarious. I love it because
it's a
brunt
meme of conferences. Every time someone with a Mac gets up on stage and
Yes.
plugs it in, you can guarantee they're going to faff around. And there's always somebody next to them saying, "Reboot, just reboot it, just reboot."
Yeah, always.
That's where we were 10, 15 years ago.
Yep.
And that's so true. Linux is the most plug and play OS in the world. It is. It is.
Yep.
So...
Go ahead, Jeff.
So one problem I have, and it's a very small problem, but one problem I have on every single Ubuntu distribution I use on both of my laptops, and I don't know if it's specific to Lenovo laptops or what, but one problem I do have is every single distribution I have to change the DPI for the fonts. Because if I don't change the DPI for the fonts, they look terrible. and it usually auto detects to 96 dpi, and I changed it to 144, and I have to do it on every single distribution. The only distributions that are any different in any way are Elementary, because you can't change it properly, and Fedora, where it makes things slightly better, but fonts on Fedora are still subpar. Every other distribution, both laptops, same problem. And I don't know what it is.
What
Certainly not my
resolution are
eyesight.
the screens on your laptops?
Sorry?
What resolution are the screens on your laptops?
1920 by 1080.
Both of them?
Yeah. Sorry, the other one is 1348, is it?
1366 by
1366 by 768, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Anyone
but
else
both of them
experienced that? I mean, I can't say I've never changed the fonts on Ubuntu or Ubuntu Mate, and the Ubuntu Mate defaults are a copy of what's in Ubuntu.
Yeah.
I've not had that problem.
With them. I don't. I mean, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. I'm looking now; it all looks perfectly readable.
Out of curiosity, have you tested Wayland on it, because it might be a mixed DPI issue, because sometimes that's a problem.
I might have done. I don't know if it's made any difference.
Okay.
I don't tend to use Wayland because I'm not a big fan of GNOME.
Fair enough.
So, but like I say, it's not just Ubuntu Mate. It's not just Ubuntu. It's every single, distribution of Linux.
Yeah, I just have a feeling that it's defaulting to the lowest possible one, which like 96 DPI would seem ideal for it. But then
Yeah.
obviously for the 1080p one, you'd want 144-ish.
And it's, well, I had my eyes lased a couple of years ago, so my eyesight's pretty good. So it's not my eyesight being bad, but it might be because, it's above average.
You have lasers coming out of your eyes, much like our wallpaper.
Right?
Yay, Jeff.
I would like that. Sorry, Jill, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I just happy you have good vision.
Yeah.
Computer Kid, go ahead.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know if you're talking right now, but your mic is not currently working.
Mm-hmm.
So if you get it working, you let us know, and we'll be glad to have you on. Steve, how are you, sir?
Good afternoon, all.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Jill.
Yay.
How you guys doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Well, I just wanted to go back to the whole how far, we have come, because I used to have, I still have what I named as the Linux install document from even when I started in Linux. And it is full of just snippets of code and settings that I would change. And it is a whole, probably a 6 or 8 page list of things that I would do when I installed a distro. And it didn't matter which distro, because it had every desktop environment on there to say, on GNOME, I do this, on KDE, I do this. And I don't even use it anymore. It's irrelevant, because you don't have to do 99% of that stuff anymore. So,
is that a problem? Is that now, has Linux now got to so boring, unless you're someone like ED, has Linux now got to the state where, like, it used to be that you sit down and you play with it, and it's a challenge to get the display at the right resolution, or it's a challenge to get the printer. Oh no, that one still is a challenge, right? But maybe a challenge to get the network. Oh yeah, that can be as well. So let's just stick with the display one, right? It was a challenge, and now it basically isn't, unless you're using a modern AMD card or a modern NVIDIA card, right? Does that mean there's nothing to do? You're like, you've got to find something else to tinker with. I think this is why a lot of the Linux user groups in the UK disbanded, is because Linux became too easy, and so there wasn't the need for people to meet up and fix each other's computers, because they all basically worked. And so they all moved on to hackerspaces, and they start tinkering with Raspberry Pis and IoT stuff and all that kind of cool, interesting tech, because Linux is now a solved problem to some degree.
Yeah, I linked in the Zoom chat to the Linux documentation project, tldp.org. There was a time in my Linux using days where that was a daily reference. You know, I needed that to actually get things done. I can't remember how many decades have passed since I've last had to look at that in order to figure things out. And it speaks to what Alan was saying about, you know, lugs. It used to be hard, you know, relatively complicated to even install a Linux on a machine. You know, we had bring a box. That's what we used to do at lugs. People would turn up in their cars with the back of their car full of their massive computers that we'd then, you know, lug, excuse the pun, lug inside. And then, you know, somebody who had the various foo for whatever distro they wanted to install would get it installed and send them away, and then a month later they'd come back with then all of the new problems that they'd discovered since they'd had the thing installed for them. And I think a lot of that's moved online, but also I don't think those problems exist. I think we found new challenges because we've got more application and more capability. We're pushing at the edges. So it's like this, like here we all are, we've all got cameras connected to our computers, all doing live streaming, right? You know, we're all now, you know, probably finding issues with, you know, how well webcams work, or, you know, capture devices, or green screens and chroma keying various things and all the rest of it. You know, we're just finding a different set of challenges that, you know, are more interesting because the basics work.
Still blows my mind that there's like 30 people and, you know, 100 plus people watching this, and we're just sitting here on our Linux like rubbish computers that clearly aren't good enough for EB, and we're sat here streaming to the internet. That's magical.
Yes.
No, but I think, like I said, a lot of that has to do with just, that's EB. He loves to come in and stir the pot.
Yeah.
That's just the way he is.
trying to get my goal,
having
and,
fun.
you know,
But I think there is a point to what he was saying. And we'll just take OBS for example. We don't have, say, Streamlabs for OBS. So we have the regular OBS, but we don't have Streamlabs because it's not compatible with Linux. Those are the type things, if you're a gamer, that would make it easier for you. But those are always going to be problems because that's not a Linux problem. That's a problem. That's the application not making it available on Linux. So
also my feeling, my read is that people that really want to get the most out of streaming use OBS Studio because there are better, more capable plugins available there, which, by the way, are broadly available for Linux. A lot of people are very much don't do the Streamlabs thing because this and this doesn't work. You know, it's very much tied to that platform, but at a cost. I've been doing a lot of work with OBS recently. I'm happy to bang on about that for a bit.
Do it.
Well, some time ago, a good friend of mine, Alan Pope, made a snap of OBS. Every so often we give it a bit of love and attention, and I'm giving it a bit of love and attention at the moment. So because of the you know, some of the unique properties of snaps, the snap of OBS includes the web browser for Linux. So you've now got the browser plugin, so you can include web sources and what have you inside it. But I've gone off and I asked YouTube what are the best plugins for OBS Studio, and there's about 20 or so, and of those 20, about 15 of them are available for Linux. So I'm working on bundling those into the OBS Studio snap, so it's sort of packed with all of the stuff you would want OBS to do. So Alan did the first upload of that yesterday, which has like the WebSocket plugin and the virtual webcam plugin and a few other bits and pieces. And I've got a branch in the GitHub at the moment, which adds about another 10 or so, including some very fancy motion transitions and really slick stuff. And yeah, I've only found a few so far that they just don't have a port for Linux, but very impressive stuff. So the OBS snap is absolutely loaded to the teeth with a whole bunch of extras.
Well,
because I was going to ask if the NDI plugin, if you can get that on the Snap.
So that is available for Linux. However, the NDI libNDI is not redistributable. I had to read their license, so we can't include that because we can't redistribute their software. In fact, nobody can. So everyone that's using OBS with NDI from some other distro, some other distros breaking the rules.
Well, it's I downloaded it from what was his name? You can get it off the OBS forum. I think Packy, if I remember right, is the name of the guy that's distributing it. But if I install,
So he's not
say, the dev
distributing.
package on Ubuntu, will it work with the
So-
Snap? Does the Snap pick it up?
It's new tech.
Yeah. So there's two things here. There's the OBS NDI plugin, which is open source, so we can put that in the Snap. But unless we have the NDI libraries inside the Snap as well, it doesn't function, and you can't redistribute the new tech NDI libraries. They are non-redistributable.
Should we, as a company, approach them and have a chat with
Probably.
them? You know, behind the bike sheds, an exchange of, you know, cigarettes.
Will I bring my laser eyes? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we should. I know I was obviously doing this. I've been on holiday this week, so this is why I've been tinkering with OBS and what have you. But yeah, I did my due diligence, which is why I haven't. I've got a branch with it all in there, but I'm not making it available. So you can build it yourself because I'm not redistributing their libraries. And yeah, I've also made a snap of the Stream Deck UI as well, which is working very well.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've tested
And
it.
I've
It
also,
works.
yeah, I've also written another script so that it does that thing where if you press a button and it needs to do something in OBS, it very quickly pushes focus to the OBS window to jam the keys into OBS, and then pushes the focus back to exactly where you are in under 12 milliseconds. So it means that you can be in any window and it'll automatically do the thing in OBS, but then put you back where you were without you realizing. So you can just push your buttons and transition around.
Oh, this is terrible. We are in such a terrible place in Linux that we can do all of this stuff right now. It's ridiculous. Chicken, go ahead.
Oh, actually, hold on. I think Computer Kid was before me.
Okay,
I think he's
Computer
ready
Kid, you
now.
got your mic working?
I don't know. Can you guys hear me?
You're a little low, but we can hear you.
How about now?
That's better. Go ahead.
So, it took me so long to get my mic fixed. Point's kind of older now, but couple things. People were saying that Linux isn't as hard anymore. There are still distros like Gentoo and even stuff like Linux from scratch.
Very good point.
And also, Jill said that Linux was very plug and play. I don't know what it is, but I constantly have problems with SD cards, mainly SD cards, but occasionally USB sticks not mounting, and I have to turn it off and back on. I don't know if that's just Arch or just my laptop, but
Yeah, it sounds like I might USB inert.
No, you're running Arch, right?
yes.
So every time your kernel updates, those kernel modules that are responsible for loading the removable media are now disconnected. So if you do a kernel update, you need to reboot, and then that won't be a problem.
Okay, I'll make sure that I get that. I don't know how often I actually update my kernel, but
on Arch probably every day.
Hey, it's not that much updating.
Oh,
what desktop environment do you run?
I jest.
i3.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm
you
a
mentioned
niche
something.
within a niche within a niche within a niche.
Right?
You mentioned Gentoo and Linux from scratch, and in the context of them, being challenging, and rightly so. I think they're excellent distributions for people that want to learn the plumbing that is behind, the whole, how is a kernel booted? How do you wire kernel to user space? What are the fundamental libraries and user space components that get you sort of that, shim of an operating system that you can then build on? Gentoo, Arch, and Linux from scratch are great as learning tools for wanting to dig into that more deeply. They're not for give it to your neighbor who's interested in
No.
trying out something other than Windows, but it is a great learning resource.
All right, Schickle, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and also in regards to the like the plug and play kind of thing. So I switched to iPhone not too long ago, and I know that's kind of weird because I'm a Linux user, but I don't know what's changed, but something really cool that I've noticed is that if I have like my laptop out and I just plug it into my iPhone, it automatically like starts to ask me if I want to tether it for like a Wi-Fi connection. Like I don't even get that on Android. Like I have to manually set that up and go through the process. Like I just plug my iPhone in and Ubuntu Mate is like, would you like to use this as a network? And I just like click yes, and it just works. I have no idea what changed, but it's amazing.
Nice, Schickle.
I know what changed.
What changed?
Yeah.
LBRY mobile devices installed by default.
So Communicate said something about the hard mode Linux distros like Gentoo. Steve had one of his hangouts recently, Zoom chats, and Cubicle Nate was there, and myself and him were waving around ThinkPads from the past. And Nate had an old laptop, a very old laptop, and he thought he wanted a challenge of what to do with it. And I suggested that he could go full hard mode Linux install, not use a distro at all, but go and find the source code for every package he needs and build it from source, and then get the next package and the next package, not with a package manager, but getting the tarball, unpacking it, configure, make install. And we don't see him here today, so I wonder if that's why.
His brain exploded.
Probably because
his browser is still compiling. It's due to finish on July the 17th.
Yeah.
I asked him about that the other day, and he said he hadn't had a chance to start it yet, but he was unfortunately being furloughed from work, so he was gonna have some time on his hands.
It is how EB loads every game on Linux, by the way. So maybe that's some of his issues.
Yep.
Could be.
Hey, you can say what you want about EV, but look at the conversation that he sparked in this show, and I thought it was awesome. So, Bill, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, you were saying, I know it's towards the end, but Linux being easier now. And one of the things that we overlook is universal packaging and what that brings, whether it's Snap or Flatpak. Because how much easier is it just for a user, no matter what they're running, whether they're running Linux Mint, Elementary, Ubuntu Mate, and they can just install packages without worrying about compiling stuff, and it just makes things easier.
Yep.
Games are there. OBS, we're just talking about OBS. All this stuff is out there. The amount of software that's easily available to anyone. If you have the capability of installing Linux, you can use any of this software, and that is phenomenal.
Yep, agreed. Bearded Wonder, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a couple of weeks ago, you were having the discussion on behalf of one of the Jamaican government departments around Q4OS.
Yep.
And when a small government decides that Linux is good enough to deploy in a work environment, that shows us how far Linux has come over the last 10, 15 years. Because would you have seen the Jamaican government deciding to ditch Windows 10 years ago, even 5 years ago? I can't see it. But now they're ready. I know it's a money thing, but it does show you that Linux has come that far that they feel secure enough with an operating system that not many people run on a day-to-day basis, that they can change their government departments over to it.
Yeah, well, regardless of the money situation, it's the idea that wouldn't matter about the money situation or not. You're right. That wouldn't have even been considered years ago. Just to have a stable system out of business probably wouldn't have been maybe. Yeah, I think maybe Munich tried it. But other than that, you wouldn't find a business trying to run a Linux distribution. Dan?
The Munich issue was great. They've really done well with that. Oh, wait, they've gone back, haven't they?
Yep. Shickle, I seen that coffee cup, dude.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I needed to take a swim, so I got a cup.
That
big
is an
enough to do it
amazing
in.
cup, dude.
I was thinking exactly the same.
It would be
I
the
was
bathroom lights.
I was gonna make a point on Bill's point of discussion, which was the snaps, the universal packaging thing. And I made a video recently, sort of putting myself out on the coals and hanging from a limb. And it was about how snaps. I was basically defending them in the same way that we defend Linux from people coming over from other platforms who are just real toxic and awful. And I think to me, the thing that I've noticed with them is because even as somebody who didn't understand them and didn't like them at first, I've come to love them and use them every single day. It does make things easier. And I think even if we don't use them ourselves, I think snaps and flatpaks are a benefit not only for developers, and especially in terms of getting bug reports, from versions of an app that's 3 years old and hasn't been updated. Well, now this kind of solves that problem, right? Like things that have been fixed, users have. And if they have issues, it's relevant now and not totally already fixed from a while ago, which I believe is something that Popey brought up multiple times, is just bug reports from ancient versions. It fixes that problem, and users get the newest stuff like Telegram features, so you're not always seeing that your version of Telegram doesn't support rolling dice or something ridiculous like that. Like, it just makes it so much easier. And I feel like that right there is enough of a point to users where, like, we have this available to us. We have it doesn't matter what distro you're running, how old your Pulse Audio version is, you have apps that are up to date.
I have a nice anecdotal story that happened this week about this. I'm not trying to pimp snaps, but it was just a nice experience. Someone, I can't remember how I saw it, but someone notified me, or I noticed that there was a new piece of software. You may be aware of a piece of software called DOSBox, which is a PC emulator. You can play DOS games inside DOSBox, right? And there's a group of people who've been trying to get new features into DOSBox, but they've been finding it difficult. So they decided to fork DOSBox and call it DOSBox Staging. I think the hint there is this is a staging area for stuff that we hope to get into DOSBox if we're lucky, but it's difficult. And I thought, this has got some new features. I'll make this a snap so that lots of people can easily install it and not have to compile it themselves. So I just, idly one evening made a snap of the thing, put it in the Snap Store, shared it among a couple of friends and said, do you want to try this out, see if it works? And it works okay. And I wake up the next day to someone from the DOSBox Staging project leaving a lovely comment on my repository where I did the snap configuration, saying, thank you for making it. I've put a link to the store page in the DOSBox Staging webpage. So if you go to DOSBox Staging website, the download page has got a big snap button right at the top. And I thought, well, that's very nice. Like, I didn't expect them to do that. But they gave me a better icon so I could improve the look of it. They gave me some other tips on things I could improve. And then another guy does a little fix to it, which reduces the size of the snap down to 2 megabytes, which makes it nice and small, which everybody loves small application packages, right? And I just felt, I consider myself not a developer. And all I did was package up somebody else's software. And then these other people came along and positively contributed to that. And that made me feel good because I felt like I've done something. There are people out there who can use that software now more easily because I've packaged it up nicely. Yeah, there might be an app image, there might be a flat pack, there might be devs, it's probably in the AUR. All of those things exist. That's fine. I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter that there's all these other available. I just did my little bit and other people came along and helped out. And I think that is where we've got to in Linux. Is it's not just about all the hacking around trying to get things working, but it's everyone's now got past that stage of I can get a graphical user interface. Now I'm going to help someone else. I'm going to do something that's going to improve somebody else's experience. And that's what happened to me in the last couple of days. People helped me because I was helping someone else. And I think that's what we should strive for, is that positivity, the helping people.
Yep. Agreed. That, and without going into all of the whole snap conversation, because that's a long, in-depth conversation, I do appreciate the fact that we have it. I put a link in the YouTube chat for Chicken's video, and I think every single person in here needs to go watch that video because there was some awesome points in that.
Yes.
So, just saying.
Is that the video of him pouring the coffee over his head?
Oh God.
We need a iced coffee challenge.
So I would just point out to Alan that you should clip Schickel's video because it's actually an advert for the new show podcast.
Just saying.
The new show
Yes.
is amazing.
All right. I'd love to continue the conversation, but we are out of time for this episode. And but everybody gets the last word. So, Alan, last word.
If you want to learn how not to cool your hard drives, listen to episode 2 of the new show, which you'll find at thenew.show.
Exactly. Crayons for the win. Revenge. Last word.
Sorry I didn't have much to contribute today. I'll see you all again at 8 o'clock, some of you, and hope the rest of you guys have a good night and stay safe.
Glad to have you, brother. Aris, last word.
Thank you for the stream. Thank you to Martin being here and Alan. And I'll try to make the other show too.
Joe, last word.
Next time I'll learn where the unmute button is. Wonderful show. Appreciate all the hard work that goes into it, Rocco. It's really nice to have a place to come to and such a wonderful community. And these distros that are being looked at and all the work that's gone into Mate, just amazing work, and just a round of applause for everybody. It's such a wonderful community to be a part of.
Agreed. Tony, last word.
Yes, it's installed.
Of course.
I don't normally get the chance to do it on this edition, but you let it slip, so
I did.
I went for it.
There you go. So in the next episode, it's going to be installed already.
It's already installed.
That's what I said. A new record.
I'll have beaten everyone there. I'd just like to say thanks, Rocco, for doing the European edition. It's a good one. The timing is better, although I'll do my best to stay awake for the next one. And see you all then. Take care, everyone. I'm glad to see everybody looks well. Stay safe, and I'll see some of you in the next episode in a couple of hours' time, or those that are not, I'll see in the next European edition.
Jill, last word?
Oh, thanks again, Rocco. I love being able to come once a month here. My Biddle family. I love you guys. And thank you again to Wimpy and your team for a wonderful Ubuntu Mate 2004 release. It's incredible. And I want to also thank Bill Frank for all his work he does on the documentation and on the website and everything. You do an amazing job. And I'm so happy Computer Kid came in. Happy to see you. And it's always good to see, yay! And it's always good to see Schickel too, because this is the second time he's came into the European. Yay. But I love all of you, and thank you so much for a great show.
Very nice. Sai, last word. Sai, I don't know if your mic's working or not. I know you're unmuted now, but we're not hearing anything. So, okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Rocco, and thank you to all the wonderful people today. You make my night. Really a wonderful discussion. I want to give credit only to the Polish community, which is really active on the last few days. They're organizing also virtual lugs like this. So just keep it like this. I like it. And great new show, Alo.
Nice. Robin, last word.
Thank you, Rocco, as always, and great to see everybody again and keeping well. Thanks, Alan and Martin, for joining us as always on this one. It's been a fun one this time round. I'm having having a very good time at the moment. I'm going quite wild at the moment with lots of testing at the moment. I'm testing the new elementary update this week. I've been testing Manjaro. I'm currently running with the KDE Neon at the moment, trying to test out the 5.18.5 Plasma build. I can't see any changes there at the moment. Apparently there's 66 odd changes for me to try and find there somewhere, but maybe they're quite so technical that they're hidden in the depths that I haven't yet found, but having great fun anyway. And I've got a week off work as well, so more play for me. So take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time.
Nice. Martin, last word.
Thank you all for your thoughts and insight about Ubuntu Mate. We'll do what we can to take that on board and make the next one better. And thank you all for being here, having a lovely chat and reminiscing about just how awful it was in the old days and how much better it is now.
So much better now. Bill, last word.
Since it's appropriate, since it's Ubuntu Mate, I just want to say a shout out to Luke Horwell and Monica Madden for all the work that they did on the website. I just had a small part. They did most of it. And then Jill mentioned documentation. Larry Bushy puts in so much work on the documentation. And if you like Mate, he offers some ebooks and print books. If you go onto the website, you can see they're really good. If you like using Mate, there's something to look into. So thank you, and thank you, Rocco.
Well, two things. One, you can also, even if you don't need it, you could also purchase it just to donate to his work that he's putting into it. And the other thing is we got to get Luke and Monica on here as well. Just saying, throwing it out there.
You may struggle getting Luke to make an appearance. He's somewhat of a privacy conscious individual.
Well, I've been trying to get Rick Mills on here too, but it ain't happening either. So, all right, Dan, last word.
Thanks as always, Rocco, and thanks to Martin and Bill for their work in the Mate group, and it's always enjoyable. Yeah, it was a good conversation, even if EB was stirring the pot, trying to get me going. That's okay. I appreciate that. I'm one of the old graybeards, so I can say that it has come a long way. So anyway, look forward to the later show, and I'll see everybody there.
Thanks for being here, Dan.
Thanks.
Tom, last word. Tom. All right, maybe we'll get back to you. Jeff, last word.
Well, thank you for having me for the first time. I really enjoyed it, as usual, because I'm first time joining the chat, but definitely not the first time watching. So thank you for having me, Rocco. Thank you for Biddle. Thank you, Martin, and everyone at Canonical for Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate. And stay safe.
You're welcome back anytime, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yay, Jeff.
Big Pod, last word.
Thank you for having this, especially since it's Europe edition, and it's at a more sensible hour, even though I still almost fell asleep and fell off the chair.
Nothing new.
Yeah. And now it's a better chair at least. I took the back off, so I do I do less of the movement, so less of squeaking.
So what you're saying is you could probably fall off the chair if you fell asleep.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
That would be a key one.
All right, DJ, last word.
Actually, I have a couple. First, I just wanted to say the first, Rocco, auto tiling windows. Awesome. You should go check it out. If you haven't, it's on Pop. Second, thank you, Canonical, for your support of ARM. And I'm also mad at you. You've blown my 2-year uptime on my servers because I'm moving off of the proprietary releases onto yours. It's running very well. And thanks, Rocco, for this show. And finally, what the hell is Windows?
Oh, that was awesome.
I love it. Computer Kid, last word.
This was fun. I'm always looking to get more live podcasting, but it's funny. I came to the Europe edition when I'm in America, but this was really fun. I hope I can do it again.
Well, you're welcome back anytime, and we have another edition at 8 p.m., so there you go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Schickle, last word.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny, though, he mentions being on the Europe edition. Me, too, as well. I woke up at like 11:30 in the morning because that's just how I am. And it was perfect timing to come join this, so I'm glad I caught you guys. Bunch of wonderful discussions from people who have had experiences I didn't even know were real. So mind blown. I living in the future.
Well, even though this is the Europe edition, it's just a time format so people can actually join without, messing up their sleep schedule. So everybody's welcome. I actually had a comment on YouTube the one time that said, this says this is the Europe edition and like 90% is from America. Well, like everybody's welcome, so hey. Bearded Wonder, last word.
Thanks, Rocco. That was a great discussion that Bob started, so thanks, Bob. Just to mention a shameless plug, myself and Moss and a special guest, Leo, will be recording Distro Hoppers Digest tomorrow night, so look out for that in your podcatchers next week. And I'll be reviewing Q4 OS, so I've kept it on this laptop for over a month now, so yeah, it's going strong. But thanks for putting this on at a sensible time, like everyone else here in Europe has said. So I will not be joining you later, but I'll try and join in next week. So hopefully see you next week.
Very nice. Diddle Dan.
Let's plug my new app that I released this week.
Do it.
You'll notice behind me, if you can see my hands, this is done by an app that I wrote based on some code that someone released in a rather, shall we say, convoluted post. I made it simple, made it a snap, and it's in the Snap Store under Fake Cam.
Nice.
Cool, Diddle Dan. Did you use Avatarify? Trying to say Avatarify.
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay.
All right. Steve, last word.
Hey, thanks, Rocco. And I just want to say to Schickle, you and Jason, the coffee thing, been there, done that.
Sounds familiar, don't it, Steve?
See you guys tonight and see you guys maybe Sunday morning.
All right. Thank you all for joining us this week. It was an awesome discussion, regardless of how it was started. I love talking to you guys, and I love being here. So I appreciate you showing up. And we'll see you in a few hours for the regular Biddle edition. If you want to join us for the next Biddle Europe, that is going to be, hold on, let me see here. It is actually going to be June 13th, the weekend of South, or what would have been South. So that'll be the next Biddle Europe. All right, we'll see you in a few hours. But until next time, long live Linux.
Love you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Skaters.
Happy Mother's Day.